Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision.
Thank you guys for coming today. So this one's going to be a really cool one. We're going to dive into not only business, but probably get heavily into some personal development, human behavior, all mixed with philosophy. I had a really cool call with Angelo. I think it was last week, and we have a lot of similarities in what we love to study and how it applies to business as well. So I think we're going to have a fun, deep, philosophical dive into all things business and human behavior today. So thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Carla. Good to see you.
Yeah, and just a little background on Angelo. So Angelo D'Amico is the president and CEO of a manufacturing company based in Ontario, Canada, with over 25 million in annual sales globally. With a background in economics, management consulting, and philosophy, Angelo is known for applying rigorous strategy and timeless ideas to modern leadership culture and community challenges. He serves on multiple nonprofit boards, contributes to the arts and healthcare sectors, and is passionate about bridging business success with philosophical insight. Please welcome Angelo.
Hey, good to see you today.
Awesome. So we're just going to dive right in, because I think what was really interesting about Angelo's position at the company is Angelo has a very different perspective and a very different way that he kind of dove in and became president of this company, because he wasn't one of the founders, came into an established business that was already running quite well. And I would love for you to dive into how you navigated that transition respectfully within the company, within the leadership team, because I know that in any company, when someone new comes in, it could be really it is just kind of tough and sticky and sometimes a bit abrasive, depending on the culture of that's already existing in the company. So I'd love for you to dive into a little bit more about how you made that transition so smooth.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that most companies, when they're looking for succession, especially in kind of key positions, they're looking for some of those hard skills, but at the same time, maybe it's important to look for who shares the values and who can uphold, what you've got going right already. I would say that the existing leadership in the company that I'm a part of was really keen on that. I mean, they had some opportunity even to sell the company to other buyers who were not involved in the company or might not even be in the industry. But they chose to prioritize the people and the values. And my joining the company is a product of that intention. So the leadership at the time felt that I was somebody who could respect and uphold the values that they had and that I shared them naturally. Maybe we'll get into that too, about how your natural values and the company's values fit together. But then coming in, I think, so having that faith in me was great. And I focused really on not being a know-it-all. I think that when I got there, I really respected the fact that I was going to be dealing with people who had decades of industry experience in an industry that I was not a part of. We're a manufacturing company of elastomeric products for businesses, industrial products, and we sell globally. And it was not something that I was really well versed in. I knew it at an arm's length, but that was about it. And so to come in and have people that were my senior in more than one way, and to have to go in and say, okay, now I'm going to have this position that's meant to give you direction, could go awry in a couple of ways, as you said. So for me, it was really just about observing what was happening. So I really gave myself the time to observe, to watch the different parts of the business and to speak to the people who already knew what to do and how to do it well. And I didn't go in there to prescribe my own thinking on top of what they knew how to do. I really went in there and said very openly, I'm here to understand. I don't know. I'm hoping that in the long run that I can be of help. And by sitting down and getting to know them and spending that time, I not only got to know what they did there at their desk, but I also got to know kind of who they are and about their families and the person they are when they go home. And that was just as important, so the first few months that I was there, I think doing that and not really putting the pressure on myself to have all the answers and kind of prove myself from a technical perspective was key.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome, because it's almost like the perception and the shift between, if I'm a leader, I have to prove myself and I have to do all these things, versus if I'm going to lead, like, how do I support these people? How can I be of service so that I can help them actually do what they're doing better? It's a very different perspective to go in with. It's more of a humble perspective, but obviously, like, it worked because what's the dynamic between you and the team now?
So I've got a great relationship with the company, and yeah, I will share some perspectives on this, but definitely what you're saying is true, and that got called to account awfully fast because when I got to the company, it wasn't too long before we got hit with some serious volatility in the world, and we really counted on being all aligned about that and having trust in each other. So um, I I was really grateful that I didn't put that pressure on myself. And also, I think that the people that were in the company already were receptive to me coming in. And my belief is a leader is somebody who everybody collectively agrees that when that person or trusts that when that person makes a decision, they'll do it with their best interests at heart. They're not just going to be selfish. They're going to be thinking about everybody. And so the only thing I really had to prove was that I should be worthy of that. And that got called to account awfully fast with logistical issues and strikes and pandemics and all these types of things. And the company got hit with some really big curveballs. In the end, though, we were well positioned to work together on that and think outside the box as a team. And so, exactly like you said, it was better to just kind of come in there with a little bit of humility and just be open to the fact that let's let everybody know I don't really know what's going on, but I'm gonna be willing to learn and willing to be supportive.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that so much. And I want to touch base on something you said earlier, where you mentioned your values and the company's values can align. So I am a stickler for this. I love this. It's one of my favorite things to do with individuals.
Sure.
I want you to share it in like real world experience as well, so you can kind of help other people understand like how powerful that is.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess I've been really personally interested in the idea that we're trying to balance, I think, just as people, whether it's personal or professionally, the things we have as goals, like our ambitions, and then our values and virtues, and the things we're tethered to. Um, and so I think a lot of times these are our personal philosophies. Now, whether you get them out of a text somewhere or within yourself, and or maybe they're the same, but I think that just knowing yourself gives you that kind of confidence to go in there and be comfortable either not knowing or taking a direction and being okay with whether it goes right or wrong because you know that you're being true to yourself and people can see that. So um, I think in practice, there's a number of ways. Like if you're building a business strategy or a plan, two different things. But if you're building those types of things or you're modeling out a business and you're trying to say, okay, here's where we want to go. Firstly, there's a number of ways it could go wrong, but also there's a number of ways it could go right. And so you could be successful in a way that's not even true to you. So I think that we want to make sure that we're getting busy, not burnt out, but busy, feeling good, feeling productive, feeling like that busyness is serving purpose for us. And so um, yeah, I think that just taking your personal values and making sure that when you go to sleep at night, you feel good about how you treated people in the workplace, and that you're authentic when you were there, and that when you deal with customers and suppliers, that you're really building long-term relationships that you value and that are durable through hard times. So we often in leadership roles call people to kind of rise to the occasion when there's tough times and volatility, and I think that if we don't share common values and if we don't first demonstrate that we're on the same page and that we're reciprocal about that, we're going to have a hard time kind of calling, recruiting people into those causes if beforehand we don't have that alignment in the first place.
Yeah, which is amazing as well, because I love what you're saying. I love you brought up burnout too. And I totally agree. Like if we're not aligned with our values, we are going to burn out. Like we're going to be exhausted. We're not going to feel like work is meaningful to us. And therefore it's going to be really challenging for us to actually wake up and feel fulfilled, inspired, and want to get on board with the company, which is it's fascinating because it's kind of one of those simple dynamics that we miss a lot and we attribute burnout to so much more. But I've seen people who are workhorses that don't get burnt out and people who barely work that get burnt out. And it's like, well, what's the difference? And it's actually because one's really in alignment with something that's fulfilling and the other person is doing something that's not fulfilling at all. So, yeah, why would they be on board for the mission? And I kind of like, I love attributing this as well. It's like the difference between motivation and inspiration. So if I have to give you external rewards constantly to motivate you in your job, I know you don't like it. I know you're not feeling fulfilled. But if like the reward is the job, then you're fulfilled by what you're doing. You're fulfilled by the goals you're achieving. And it doesn't take just knowing that one person. It's also important, I call it like knowing the soul of the company, right? Because how can I help that one person understand how they connect with the company if I haven't even done a deep dive like into what the soul of the company is, Am I just like a business or is there something behind this?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and whose role is it to make sure that people have clarity about that so that they can even wrap their brain around, am I at the right place being in this company? So is this a company that has values that resonate with me, and that if I was to work hard for this endeavor in the direction that it says it's going, am I going to feel good about that?
Mhm.
Sometimes I think you could have a good direction and people not really understand it, and then you don't get that collective. And I think that's something we touched on before is uh we have like objective right and wrong, we have subjective right and wrong, and then we have like the collective belief. Even if things are subjective, if we agree about it, we're going to at least be willing to take action and work together. And I like to think that, in business you have good times, but you also are going to have hard bad times
For
that test
sure.
your resolve. And um it's only when we feel like what we're doing is worth it that we would be willing to endure the bad times, because we say, you know what, those bad times are worthwhile because. And so you have to answer that question for people, and they know it for themselves. But it's about, are we doing it in a way that they can understand on behalf of the business and that they can feel good about being a part of? Yeah.
Yeah. I love this too because it like so the companies that I work with, the ones who are generally in charge of the company mission and culture also have a really high value on personal development and growth. And they're the ones bringing in education systems and like all these other dynamics to empower people. I'm curious, is that you at this company? Because I know that you love like all these things and the growth dynamics. So I'm wondering if you took the leadership there.
Yeah, so
That's
lucky
awesome.
for me, there was kind of the seeds
Mhm.
of that prior to my being there, and so I got to kind of keep it going and kind of be creative about it. So we do offer education, both internally and externally, but also I think um, when I came in, it was my own education had to come before everybody else's education in a way, in a very short term way. So for me, it was like I had to learn about the business model and the strategy. I had to learn about the financial. I had to learn about the process system, and I had to learn about the people and the culture and how all that worked. Once I did that, then I could start offering value to other people. So whether it be in education or in other forms, but on the personal development side, so that's the development on the business side. But on the personal side, I'm always trying to connect like. Um, things that that I've read or that I've experienced into my own reflection, whether that be the end of the day or whenever. But things like, he who knows not which port he seeks, no wind is favorable. That sort of Seneca type of thing, where it's like, well, if you don't really know what resonates with you and what your goals are, like, how do you know when you're doing something in that direction? How do you know? How is any wind favorable if you don't really know where you're going? Or um, he who desires constant success must change with the times, right? That sort of thing. And that's actually a Machiavelli quote, but I like it because it means that who I am today or the things I know today aren't necessarily the things that are going to keep being the most effective things in the future. So I have to be willing to change. And the company has to be willing to change. So we're really just adaptable. And so I definitely bring how I feel about my own development into the company. And yeah, we bring our strengths and I think our weaknesses into the company. So it's worth reflecting on those things and at least identifying what they are.
Yeah, no, I love that too. And it's fun because philosophy is like as you're saying those things, right? It totally applies to yourself, but it also is just that's like business strategy. It becomes our basic business strategy of how we're running and managing the company. And it's like, okay, well, if I want to be successful forever, I have to change with the times. Like that's a business thing, but it's also a personal development thing. And I think it's interesting because sometimes we separate it when the two are so closely interconnected. And I love that dynamic about leadership too, is even if you're wanting your business to move to the next stage, it also requires the leaders to move to the next stage. And
Yeah.
sometimes the leaders train new leaders to move to the next stage. And all these people are moving and growing with a company, and it's almost like a personal development vessel slash philosophical like,
Yeah.
dynamic while building a company and making an impact. I'm like, this is fun. Like,
Yeah, I think probably we put a lot of pressure on ourselves if you're in a role of influence or of leadership, in a company. I mean, there's leadership authority, but there's also leadership influence, and that could reside anywhere in the company. But there's probably this pressure to feel like you know everything, or that maybe you get your heels in about something you said or something you believe. But people really do respect when you can be steady, but you can also be flexible. So they're not, I think. in competition with one another. So I think a person who's steady and stable can bring that into the company just by being who they are, not being volatile and not being reactive all the time to stuff. But at the same time, they have to still discern when is a change really an important change so that, yeah, we're not kind of going up and down and left and right on every whim, but when is it really warranted? And I think that still requires where are we going to even decide what's
Yeah.
warranted and what's the right kind of changes. So, yeah, it all does tie together. I think there's a little bit of difference for me in terms of when I'm seeing a development opportunity personally and in business, I see it's the same opportunity, but it maybe translates into action differently. Well, depending on my environment, so my work environment or my personal environment. So like I'm approaching my family, my friendships, and those sorts of things. It's very similar, but a little bit different than what I'm going to do with staff and suppliers and industry peers and customers and those types of things. But the fundamental core part of it is the same. It's just me in practice. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. And I love that dynamic. So it's like leaders in practice, right? And it's funny because sometimes we think we can't do that, which is fascinating. And it's usually, sometimes it's the goal, right? Like you might have a goal to be seen a very specific way in the world, and you're really building up that persona. And I've seen that. And honestly, there's one individual, she's very successful in the coaching world, very successful, but I struggle to talk to her because she's constantly in, it's like marketing mode doesn't turn off, right? And she's friend of the families. We're all like hanging out at a birthday party. I'm like, you don't have to market right now. Like you can calm down. We can just like talk, but you can't turn it off. But simultaneously, her goal is different than mine. Her goal is actually to be known and recognized as that specific person. And she's nailing it, man. She's nailing it. She does it all the time, all day, every day, which is fascinating. And then I look at someone like Stephen Hawking, and he was fun because I remember reading about him, and apparently he goes into his classrooms and he looks at his students and he's like, so everything I taught you is wrong. And this is what I learned. And we're going to start from scratch. And then he just goes to the board and he's like, here we go, and he just starts teaching again based on the new knowledge that actually like makes his knowledge false. And part of his goal was to prove himself wrong, because if he could only find ways to prove himself right, he could never uncover the deeper mysteries. And I was like, I love that. I was like, I definitely resonate with that more because I want to know more and I want to understand more. So if I'm going to prove myself wrong at a certain point, like it's been a fun game. And I don't know if you've even tried that. It's really fun where you're like, I'm going to prove myself wrong. And you're like,
Yeah.
well, I was wrong. Or like, this one's really hard to prove wrong. I haven't been able to prove it wrong yet. Like maybe this is a thing.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like that's very true to I guess like the scientific method where you're honing in on where you could be wrong and you're trying to focus on that with some new hypothesis about what's right. But you to know where to hypothesize, you can't be hypothesizing about things that are already proven to be right. You have to zoom in on the unknowns. Otherwise, we're wasting our time, right? And I use the term hypothesis all the time in my workplace. I just think, this is the hypothesis we have about what needs to happen with this process, or we have a hypothesis about what we think will be more competitive. But I think just sometimes using those language kind of tricks us into thinking it's okay to test and take small risks, because sometimes if you don't take any small risks, one day we're going to have to start taking really big ones because we're awfully far behind. So this idea about like this method of, yeah, where am I wrong? What can I correct? That sort of thing is really, really important. Going back to what you said before about the person that you knew, that kind of is always, has that hat on all the time and can never take it off. It sounds so. I'm very interested in this idea about balancing ambition and virtue. I think that's
Yeah.
something that's really interesting, and it affects me in my world a lot. Um, but I wonder if one of the things that people find either makes somebody someone who you want to gravitate to or not is when you look at them, do you think um, they are ambitious, constrained by their values, or do you think they apply values insofar as they won't interrupt that person's ambition? So if they put ambition first and their values come whenever it doesn't interfere with ambition, I think we dislike that actually. But I think when our ambition fall in, like the limits of our ambition are where we don't want to cross our virtuous lines. I think when we see that the virtues come first, I think we like that and we can get behind that. And so it sounds like this really like academic thing, but when people are judging you, you got dozens and dozens of people and you want to bring them together and have them say this is a good direction, and yeah, we love to, stuff's going wrong today, why don't we work a little harder together? I think it matters a lot what they think about you, what they think about their ability to trust your intentions and what you value. So I think that that's all connected.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I had a feeling we were going to sound like two philosophers having a philosophical conversation. So I was like, this is going exactly the way I thought it would.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, this individual is like a great example too, because I like talk about this all the time, right? Like where our core values are actually where we feel the most virtuous, right? So I will be completely disingenuous and I won't be virtuous in areas of life that are really low on my values and not important, right? But I'm very virtuous and very genuine and very authentic if it's something that's so important to my values, right? Like, and I'm also relentless in my pursuit of fulfilling what is unique. And, the Greeks called it artelos, the teleology, the end in mind, right? So my personal end in mind, I feel so connected to, like, I get like tears of inspiration on a regular basis where like, there's no way I'm giving that up. So like,
Yeah.
that's my relentless pursuit where I get over ambitious, but then there's these other areas where I'm just completely like, just like, fuck it all. Cause like, I
Yeah.
don't really care. And it's funny because it's like, depending on who hangs out with me will depend on how they view me. If they have similar core values, they're going to think I'm amazing and I'm doing so many cool things. But if they have different core values, they're like, she's nuts. Like she's crazy. I have one friend, she's like, you need to slow down. Like you need to calm down. Like you do too much. I don't know why you do all that stuff. And she's a hoot. I love her so much. But our values are so different that to her, I'm like this crazy person doing all this stuff for no reason. Where I have another friend who has similar values and she's like, it's amazing. I love what you do. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Because she's doing similar things and we kind of brainstorm in a different way. So I think it's really cool because it's like when you really understand your core values, you more understand other people's core values. And then you can also understand where they're coming from because sometimes we get frustrated or upset, like if people are criticizing us or against us or whatever, but they only do that because we're challenging one of their innate core values. And if I don't take it personally in that moment and I can understand what's important to them, it might actually be something that's really profound and helpful for me because it's a perception that I'm not seeing because I'm so like one-sided in my own perception and view. I look at like I think of the world, and if we look just even around our room, like the quantity of information that is in just this one space that I'm sitting in is just overwhelming. So if I noticed every single thing based on every single person's value, I'd be overwhelmed. I can't take in that much information. So it's almost like we're meant to have this just like one-sided view in a sense, just so we could function in a world that's just too sensory perception. Like we just have too much too often. But when we have other people who come in and show us that other side, it's like it's also a gift. Sometimes it hits us because we have our own stuff going on, but it's a real gift to like get a perspective from other values, which I guess the cool thing is we sometimes we have a hard time doing this in life, but in business we see this as just a different person with a different opinion. That's why I love like combining business and life together. Even when I'm working with business owners and they have challenges with their family, I was like, this is the same thing as your leadership team. It's exactly the same. You're just judging like your kids or your wife or your husband, but they're coming at you the same way as your leadership team is. What's the difference in your head? And when they see it, they're like, you're right. And I'm like, yeah, totally. Like everything's the same. Like, why are you mad at them for doing the same thing that these other people are doing that you're happy about? Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum.
Yeah, I think yeah, you make a good point about kind of like the sensory overload. I think that if we looked out at the world and all we all saw was the objective things, that means we would all see things the same way. No
Totally.
subjectivity. And like, where would the advantages and disadvantages even arise? Where would the relative interests come, and where would the unique perspective? There would be nothing. So the interest goes way down for me. I think that the beauty is in that a person more than uh, you know. Their clothes and their face and whatever is a lens, and if you can understand in yourself included, so if you work at understanding like what kind of lens am I, that I like, what's the prescription called me that I see the world through, and so why do I see the world that way? But then you use that for other people and try to say, instead of disagreeing with everybody with a different opinion, then you say, how is that opinion right to them? Like, what prescription would I need
Yeah.
for that to be the right course of action? And a lot of times you sympathize a lot better because of that. And isn't that a good quality when you're trying to talk about collectively getting people to work together, right? So I don't see how you could do it otherwise.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing too because it's so true. There's this dynamic within us that we're constantly wanting to be objective, but you are right. Like then everyone thinks the same, and how could we create and innovate and do different things if everyone's objective and sees the world the same objectively, right? And it's interesting because it's like even when you walk through an art gallery, art is so subjective, and every person resonates with something different based on whatever's going on inside them, whatever they love, whatever they see, right? And it's like every artist had to be subjective. They had to have preferences. They couldn't all be objective. If they were always objective, we wouldn't have the art in front of us the way that we have it. And I think that we forget that is the things that we love the most. Art's an example, but food's the same. If we're objective about everything, then we probably wouldn't have as many like varieties of restaurants, you know? All the things that we totally enjoy experiencing ironically come from people being subjective. And we forget that we're not, it's like we forget we're not meant to only have like this one side in the world and in our lives, that everything is necessary for us to be able to move forward in these inspiring ways that serve us. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you kind of accept that, well, what it is to be an individual is to be subjective. It's one and the same. I think that it forces, if you think about it, it really forces some humility because a lot of things that are right to you um, are subjectively right. And so
Yeah.
acknowledging that and saying, how could someone else see it differently and also be right in their mind? I think it's a good exercise anyway. So but in leadership, we need to see people in the long term. We can't just look at one interaction or one day and say, what do you need right now? Or what would make you happy now? Or are we agreeing in this moment? Like, yeah, you want to do that, but you want to think about that in the long game. So we're looking after a broad spectrum of people and different organizations. And we're also looking deep into time. And so we need to create that like macro view. And so we can't get too entrenched in this little like, I'm the one who's right and I know everything. And this is my own perspective because I think you're going to omit so much detail or so much perspective that you'll never make the best kind of decisions. And you'll never even tap into the people who have better answers than you have because you won't know that their subjectivity is valuable right now. So how do you recognize somebody's talents unless you can say that their subjectivity is maybe better than the way I see a certain thing? So I have my skills and talents, and so do they. One thing that I do in my company, I think fairly well, is openly acknowledge that I'm confident in what I'm good at. I'm very confident in other people for what they're good at, and I never think,
Mhm.
well, they do that, but really, I'm the best at everything. That's why I sit in this chair because I'm the best at everything. Well, no, I'm the best at like a specific thing, just like they are the best at a specific thing. And when we all don't do the thing we're good at, the whole thing kind of falls apart, even if I do my part really well. So, I think that's a really humbling thing. And it makes you feel kind of vulnerable that you need the whole community to make this all work. So, um,
Yeah.
going back to values. So, you need this whole community to pull together. You need to be collective and aligned, and you need to give them clarity about that. If you don't approach that in an authentic, values-based way, I don't see how you get to those ends anyway.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's reminding me just even like of the cultural differences and dynamics too. Something that was very humbling for me that taught me what you're sharing, where everyone has their subjective bias. Mine is not right. Even if I prefer mine, it's still not right. And yours is not wrong, and yours isn't right, and mine is not wrong. Like it's just a different way. Was when I first started coaching, I started working with a lot. I wound up getting lucky in a sense, but I was working with a lot of people from different religions, different cultures, different countries, different backgrounds. And it was amazing because it's not my job to tell anyone what's right or wrong. It's to help them shift their misperceptions. So if they had a trigger or were frustrated by their own culture, I'm actually there to help them love their culture to a greater degree, right? Because it just depends on the charge. If they're overly negative about it, I'm going to help them balance their perception out to get to equanimity. If they're overly positive, I balance their perception out to get to equanimity. And what was really interesting is when I would work with women from more of like third world countries and stuff, and obviously they were a little bit wealthier families, but in that dynamic, they were jealous of the opportunities that I had coming from a Western world, and they were putting down the opportunities they had because of their dynamic and where they felt stuck. And it was humbling to go through and show them the other side and all the opportunities they get because of the cultures they're in, and take mine off a pedestal and see the challenges, like in the things that like the drawbacks, the downsides of mine, to balance the perspective. And it really made me realize like my way's not right or wrong. It's a preference. It's just a preference based on what I like and what I enjoy. But in reality, like this person also has a pretty phenomenal life and very different and doesn't have to deal with some of the stuff that I have to deal with. And there could be some like great benefits to me doing that. And I was like, that's amazing. And it's incredibly humbling. And it's like, even in saying that, sometimes people are very like culturally connected in the United States because we're such a melting pot, you know, and I know it's the same in Canada too. I lived in Vancouver for a little while, so all the little pockets of cultures are actually pretty prevalent in different areas. It was interesting. So they carry that culture with them, but oftentimes those cultures like carry certain dynamics. Like I grew up in an Italian technically household, you know, for till I was like 13 years old. It was like heavy Italian, man. And so when I was in work, I was great at conflict. I was really good at conflict, but also for Italian. That's what it is. Also, Italians don't just want to have conflict. We also want to resolve conflict. So we're really to bring up like the tough subjects, and then simultaneously we're like, now let's fix it. You know, we're going to talk about it. We're going to get mad at each other. We might even like yell at each other, but now we're going to fix it. And that's like our Italian way. But I actually had some really great like bosses and mentors who didn't judge that part of me and saw it as a tool and an opportunity. So it did never get shut down, but somehow like I'd managed to be the person that they would bring in to like help things move along when things were like getting stuck. And they're like, well, Carly will do it. Like Carly will
Yeah,
say
I
it.
can, and the autonomy to somebody saying that like that's an advantage for you and
Yeah.
giving you the autonomy to take charge in that lane. Probably when you started applying that in business, I bet you if you looked back, you weren't that strong at it compared to how you are now. But you wouldn't
No.
have become strong at it if somebody didn't take the chance and say, go ahead and I see this capability that you have. Why don't you go be bad at it for a while? Because I think you'll get really good at it, better than I could get even if I practiced. And I think that's really important. So like somebody doesn't have to be the best right now, but they might have the seeds of being something, and they need some freedom to do that and not to be so good. So
Yeah.
the sponsors of my life that have made me, land where I've landed so far, um, gave me so much freedom to do things that I now look back with so much embarrassment about. Where I thought I was doing great things, and I look
Oh,
back and think,
it's
man, what was I thinking?
mediocre.
Yeah, it was so bad. And but that's great. And I would have, you can't, that's kind of what you have to go through. That's the swamp you have to crawl through to get to the land on the other side. And that's just how it is. Now, speaking about people being different, I think one way that maybe people are listening here, if they're in businesses, one thing that's really common is, we're dealing with people of different age groups. Uh,
Yeah.
and I hear a lot of things, people talking about younger people and their motivations and things like that. And I also think that the world's changed a little bit for them about where their influences are, but also what's realistic for them financially compared to, 30 years ago. And so we have to understand that their motives are different. You used to be able to say, hey, here's a time and a half or here's double time. And everybody wanted it overtime, and now you do that and you don't get so many people, a lot of people don't want that anymore. And I get asked sometimes, I get told, some people look at that and say, wow, look, young people aren't so driven to work. And I say, well, I don't think it's that. I think, when you're the generation, say 30 years ago, and even like, I got in at a good time, I'm not complaining at it anyway. I'm including myself in the generation of people who, has a house and a, family and all that sort of stuff already. For someone like that, they want to take that extra time and extra pay because it means the mortgage, it means the groceries, it means,
Yeah.
the sports and the school and whatever it is. But for somebody who maybe, if you're in a world where 30 years old means you haven't moved out because the world's too expensive. So you have a 24-year-old employee today and you offer them to make double time on a shift. How does that double time affect their safety in their life at all?
Yeah.
So, and I don't say that to kind of beat up on any generation. What I'm trying to say is that we're driven differently. And
Yeah.
so one of the ways we need to be adaptable as people in leadership roles is don't condescend on people with different sets of values or different perspectives, but also
Mm.
um, try to understand where that's coming from and try to understand, like, if the motives are different, what are the motives? Do they want to be a part of a company who stands for certain things or that gives them a certain kind of flexibility or that recognizes that if they're going to work at your place, they're also going to have a little side hustle and figures out how to support those types of things so that they're not, uh, you know, perpendicular to your life, but they're running parallel with your life and trying to support you and push you forward. And who doesn't want to work for people and work hard for people who really want the best for them? So I think, just like I said, going back to your point about, trying to get people of different even cultures to work, not just to work together, but to understand what their motives are and the way that they see the world and the way that they see their strengths and weaknesses. A really common one, I think, is this one about young people and how do they see their strengths and weaknesses and how do they see the strengths and weaknesses of a company, and why would they stay there and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
that's something we're constantly trying to revise where I am, and for myself personally, is just trying to stay in touch with what are the drivers, because they are changing.
I love this dynamic too, and I totally agree with you. It's like the younger generation is it's like a big misperception. Because not every person on this planet has things that drive them, and they may be lazy at work, but they're not lazy in other areas of their life. And if they're lazy at work, but then they're doing Ironmans like every month, like maybe there's something there,
Right.
like maybe check into that. Like, what is actually going on? And is their job even important to them because it doesn't have the added value and the added meaning? And I think the other thing that you're right about is, we're labeling it as younger people who aren't doing as much, right? But interestingly enough, younger individuals, you are correct. They're not buying homes as early anymore. They're not having families as early anymore. I'm 42. I haven't had a kid yet. I'm not upset about it. I'll have a kid. I'm totally going to do it. But like, I wanted to do other stuff first. There were other things that were important and meaningful to me. And these younger generations are starting to ask themselves, what is meaningful to me? What do I want? I don't want to just be stuck in a grind and then retire. They want to grind the way they love. And so if they're not finding these environments, they don't want to stay. And it is a different dynamic and there's a different sacrifice. I lived in a studio apartment forever. It was awesome. I wasn't
Yeah.
bad at it. Like I was like at a tiny place, I'm figuring out where to go. I figure out what I want, and I was like, I clean it all the time. It's easy breezy. Every life is great, and I could just float around and figure shit out. But
Yeah.
it's like you're saying, if people aren't figuring out what's actually valuable to the generation, which is meaning beyond money, which is not awful. That is
Yeah.
probably
Right.
the best employee you can get because when you have an employee at your office that is like there for the meaning and not the money, they are so engaged. They're so inspired. Like they're jazzed up by your vision and mission. Like they want to be a part of it. And so it's a beautiful challenge for employers to have.
Yeah, and if anybody's watching this and saying that their business isn't like that, like they're not a tech company, or they're not something like I'm in a manufacturing company, so we make industrial rubber and plastic and foam parts. Like there's doesn't sound that sexy, right? But we're also cleaning up the local parts, giving to the parks, giving to the local arts, donating to like plastic removal from the oceans, donating to tree planting. We're doing things that make us feel like we're a part of something, you know. So we're not just doing it doesn't have to always be the output of the value you offer to customers that's getting people to feel. It can also just be who is the company while they're doing those things. So people
Yeah.
are going to buy these types of things from somebody, but why not have them buy it from somebody who at least cares and put some thought into it? And so people, I think, want to work for companies that have a conscience and um, like know who they are and want to be something positive generally. And so I bring that up because it's all too easy to just say, well, if I was a company whose job it was to go plant trees, it's easy to get people behind that. It's really hard to get people behind something like manufacturing industrial goods, but that's what I'm doing, you know,
Yeah.
and not to be, to sugarcoat it, like there's always going to be people, there always will be people, even if they're the minority, who say, I don't care about any of that. And some of those people just want to come in and do the job and just leave me alone. That exists.
Yep.
Um, but if that truly is what they want, if they're not doing that because they're disgruntled and they've lost faith in the company, if they're doing it because that's what they want, okay. How can I support you in that? How can I get out of your way? How can I make your day good? What do you want to change about the way that this process works so that while you're putting your head down and doing that, you're having a great time? That's the best we could maybe do, right? Or maybe we could feed them often, like we do all these sorts of like food events at our place. We've got like poutine trucks and grilled cheese trucks and
Yeah.
ice cream trucks and all sorts of people coming in. And we do like all sorts of different appreciation days and fun stuff. So we're constantly eating at our place. And so for the person who doesn't want to get involved in a park cleanup, they're still going to come eat, right? So, and maybe one of the changes I made too when I became the president at our company, we had outgrown, like we can't meet in like a lunchroom. We're too many people. So in the first week I was the president, we bought enough fold out tables and chairs to put in production. So every time we have a function where there's like meal involved, we go sit together and do that. So it was just a situation where people were getting their things and going to their cars or going to their offices. And like, what's the point? The whole point of doing this sort of thing is to be together and to know each other, right? Um, think about when something goes wrong and so and so over in that process really dropped the ball, and then we're all kind of upset that that happened. But if you know them and you just had lunch with them yesterday and you just talked to them about their kid and their kids, not doing so well in soccer or whatever, it's hard to really go off the deep end with that person because you see them in
Yeah.
person. So, it seems just like you're giving lunches or like community events, but you're really giving opportunities to connect. And to your point, people want that more. So let's give that to them.
And I love this is so funny. It's so creative, but it's also that dynamic of the connection, the team building, authenticity. I would say is really important too. As you were saying that, it reminded me there was a company that I worked at that would do lunches like that in the lunchroom. And interestingly enough, like the owner of the company, no ifs, ands, and buts, every day ate in the lunchroom. They turned the big dock warehouse into, they had two of them and they took one of them and it was just full of tables, like regular lunch tables, like you would be at school. And we would eat. I was one of the executives, so we would eat with like the owner, and that was kind of the thing. But everyone was always in the same room at the same time. And then when he bought food for everyone, he bought food for the whole company because you got 100 people there and there's 100 people eating in the same room with the owner and with all the executives. Nobody's different. And I will tell you, it made a huge difference. Like when I would go and connect with even the shipping department, guys, like they were some of my favorite, by the way. I love the shipping department guys. They're the
Everyone does,
best.
yeah.
They ever listen to something they hear. You guys are the best.
They're always, you go talk to them. They always have these ridiculous skills outside of work. I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
if our shipping guys listen to this, so talented even outside of work.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company.
I really value
Right?
like that.
It was like a great conversation, and you're like, this is so much fun. But it was like that community building that genuinely brought the community together. And funny enough, there was another office I worked for. And oh, by the way, that one got a little volatile every now and then, like, which is okay. I'm grateful. Like, I get it and I understand, but it was an interesting dynamic and there was still a community theme. And then there's this other office I worked for, which was interesting. And then one of the guys who managed our division, he was super volatile, so volatile. I don't think he was accustomed to myself, like coming from that industry where volatility already existed. So usually the volatility got him what he wanted. But with me and my colleagues, we're like, oh, why are you yelling? Like, we're not going to do what you say because you're yelling. Like, and we just like would walk away and he'd be like, what is going on? And I was like, come from a different environment. Like, we're accustomed to a bit more challenge. But it was really fascinating because when they did company lunches, we would go and sit with the CEO and he would bring in 10 people at a time. And he specifically brought me into the marketing group, not with my group. And the marketing group has like the best division. They're the best division. And so they're talking about how amazing things are. And he's talking about how amazing things are at the company. And I kind of just kept my mouth shut, but I'm sitting there. And after I went and talked to my colleagues, I was like, that was bullshit. I was like, this company, like, is a shit show. It's exhausting. And now I have to put on a show for the marketing department. And I looked at the CEO and I was like, I'm never going to one of those lunches again. I do not care if they get mad at me. I was like, it's massively disrespectful. Like, he knows what's going on. If he wants to have a real conversation, he can have a real conversation. And it's really interesting the difference between having a volatile person that was also authentic and building a culture of community versus like this sort of fake dynamic. And I left that one fast because that's not something that I wanted to be involved in. And so even that like authenticity and not pushing things under the carpet and not pretending and not faking and pretending like you're someone who you're not. Like, people don't sign up for that. I signed up more for the fashion designer because he had a vision and he had something inspiring that we were putting out. And it was really cool to be a part of it. It was cool to watch people's lives transform. It was cool to hear what he wanted to do. It's even cooler when I look at him now and see that he has accomplished some big goals that nobody believed in him, right? And I was like, I want to be a part of that. Right? Not
Yeah.
this over here. Yeah.
And it seems like, if I'm looking at that through my like ambition virtue lens it's really attracted to me right now.
Yeah.
I think that, you look at that second person that you've described, who's in the fashion industry, and they're like they're definitely ambitious. They've definitely got a vision. But they're doing it in a way that, like you said, they're authentic about it. It's really who they are. And it's maybe they're trying to put something new out into the world that people can enjoy, and then the first person that you mentioned, maybe their ambition is more about ego. And I bet you they go home anxious, because there's that tension between the truth and what show they're putting on every day, and that can't be easy to do. So um having to bring people into this room and kind of have this positive little thing, it sounds a little bit yeah, like ego driven and not so much service driven then. And I just think like not only do you drop a toxic person into a company that you taint that whole thing, I also think that that person can't be all that happy. They must have anxiety, and they must put
Yeah.
their head on the pillow at night with a lot of stress. And like I feel for that person, because I don't think people do that because they truly think like this is the thing that makes me the happiest. I think that probably deep down they know it's not, but they maybe feel this pressure that I have to be this thing, or to be successful, I must act a
Yes.
certain way. And it's funny that if you kind of just abandon that and free fall, and if you plant the seeds of trust with everybody, I mean, they're going to carry you when you fall, and you're going to do the same for them first, actually, so
Yeah.
that when you fall, they can carry you. But if you don't have that relationship, I think like if you're listening to this, if you're not in the habit of going home and or even throughout the day, just having honest reflection,
Hmm.
just have honest reflection, because you'll see what you did well, what you didn't do well. You come up with a hypothesis about what you could do differently, who you might ask for help next time, and then try to do that every day. And it's like this little incremental daily practice that could change your life and change your business for sure.
Well, and I think this is cool too, because what you touched on is really important, is like that dynamic of the individual coming in, and it was like an overpower thing, right? And it was interesting because the vice president who had just been hired, she was playing the same game. And sometimes she would just come and like yell at you, and I'd look and I call it, what the fuck is she talking about? Like, I don't even know what she's talking about. Like, and then she just walked away. But it was that dynamic that they're used to getting people to do things via control and like this fear
Yeah.
tactic. And now it's getting trained into the culture. And what was wild, and this is where like I can't, we're coming back to values over and over again. I can't stress it enough. Understand the individual's values that you're working with, put them in the right seat. Because, like you said, I agree with you. There's some individuals who really just, they're not even disengaged from the company. They just want to be left alone and work. And that person can go in a certain role that gets left alone and worked. Like they can be there, they can be fulfilled. And then there's other people who have other things that fulfill them and they can go into those roles, right? And when you do that, what was interesting is our little division in that company worked harder, was more innovative, worked longer hours than this other division that was highly stressed out, scared to take action, scared to make mistakes. Technically, they were supposed to be doing the things that I was doing, but they all refused to do it because they didn't want to mess up. It was too hard, you know? And here I come from this other division where we have a different culture. This company got taken on, our division got taken on and infused into this bigger company, and they were supposed to help us with production, but they didn't. And so in our company, we had a mission. We knew the customers, we understood what we were creating, we understood it was important, we understood it had value. And so when they said no, I was learning new skills. I was figuring out how to like use a system I've never used before, and I was like, how do I get this done faster? And like to the degree I was there early and I was there late, you know, and that was it. And so I'm showing the kind of fortitude that people want in a company. And it never came from that bossing around, controlling. It came from someone looking at me and saying, this is what you can do. This is what I can see in you. This is what we're doing in the company. And this is what we're trying to achieve. I don't want to let the customer down. What can we do today? And then I would look and be like, let's prioritize XYZ. I'll focus on this today. You make those calls, you sort this part out, and we'll get this out for the customer on time, you know? And so that's the difference of like a company moving from inspiration versus being motivated by outside sources. And people don't
Yeah.
realize the power of values and human values and like what we can do when we're moving from inspiration and fulfillment.
Yeah. And if you get a whole
Mhm.
company kind of rowing together that way, right? And there's people that, maybe there's not clarity about it, or maybe there's people who actually have fundamentally different opinion about what ought to be done. And sometimes you can get them on board and sometimes you can't, but you got to protect those people who really want to row in the same direction. And we're there to protect each other. So, um, another thing, I guess, like the leaders of these other companies or any organization, like they got to be thinking about the long term and what's best for people generally. This concept of, the silent election of leadership. So, you can have a leadership title and that's a position, that's authority, right? But you might not be the most influential person in your own company,
Yeah.
because people have collectively agreed that somebody else has their best interests at heart, and guess what? That's the leader. So, um, you can tell them everything you want, but they're going to kind of jump when that person says to jump, because that's the person who they trust makes decisions with their best interests at heart. So that's the person who can say jump, and then they will, because they'll say, you know what, that person wouldn't be asking me that unless it was in my best interest too. And if it's not the person that it's not an executive person, that's fine, but it's going to be somebody. And so it sounds like in your situation, or in the one that you described, people probably, maybe it was you, maybe it was somebody else that you worked with, but you had a better culture in that division, and probably there was a more autonomy, and there was probably more like good ideas coming to the surface from all different angles, and it's just more colorful and juicier, and so much more fun. So yeah, I'm with you on all of that.
Yeah, no, we had a blast. It was really fun. But we all had a common vision. We all had the common vision. We all had the core values, and we had so much fun with it.
Well, we talked about this idea about the clay, and I want to come back. I want to kind of touch on that before we're done here, because one thing we talked about, I think, the last time we spoke was, what's the value of creating clarity or having a business model, right, for everybody to talk about. And I think, if you recall, we don't have to go on it at length, but I think it's valuable anyway, just as a concept for people to take away. That oftentimes we're using the same language to describe something, but we actually mean different things in our heads. We all have our own mental model of what we're talking about, and we all think that we're aligned because we're using the same words.
It's
And
different.
we're all nodding our heads, right? But we all go away thinking very different things. And so I just think sometimes there are frameworks. I use this thing called the business model canvas, but lots of people use different ones. I think you probably use a different one that's probably equally valuable. But what's important, I think, about getting that down is that everybody can look at it, and everybody now, what I called, shares this ball of clay. Like, we all understand this is the thing we're trying to sculpt. When we say we want to make a change, we're changing this thing that we all can see and feel, instead of us having our own abstract idea of what that is, and then interpreting the desire to change totally different than one another. And we're not doing anything. That's not clarity. We're not able to row together with that situation. So I think we touched on that last time, and I thought it was really valuable, so I wanted to bring it up again.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. It's fun because even when you talk about that dynamic of shared language, you're right. Everyone has a different language, and someone could say something that means something completely different for you, but they might be like saying the nicest thing ever, and you think it's an insult because it's just the language is different. It's wild. And I would say the consulting, I enjoy it. I think it's really fun to uncover like what people mean in the culture and the history and dynamic of who they are, because every client I have has different language. And so some of it is so extremely different that on the top of my notes page, on every note page, I actually have a note like XYZ means this to this person, XYZ means this to this person. Because like I'm like, okay, if I say this and then they get confused, like it's confusing when the language isn't even aligned. So even in company visions and values and putting all this together, it's like even having the language as like a dynamic within the culture is so important. And I think what's cool too is there's language that people use already in companies. And when we talk about this, we like to pull out what already exists, right? I don't like to start from scratch because a company has a culture whether or not you see it. You may not see it and you didn't define it, but we'll just pull out what already exists. And it'll be interesting because there's already very specific language that people use. And so I'm curious too, like even this dynamic of like diving into the culture and having all this like visible, like what do you guys do in the way to make it visible to employees so they actually understand more of a dynamic of what the company is about, what it's like working there beyond just, just this is a job.
Yeah. So aside from just like everyday reinforcement and the way that we conduct ourselves and behave, not only as leadership, but just generally how we expect people to treat one another, because I think the behavior you tolerate becomes a big chunk of it. So that's part of it on an everyday basis. But these other kind of like highlights would be things like our orientation or onboarding session. We do a values session, and I deliver that session as a president. And sometimes we'll have either a manager or another executive in that room too, and a handful of new hires. So people that have been there less than a year, maybe it's in the first 3 months even that they've been there. And what we're there to do is kind of go around the table. I say, I'm Angelo. This is kind of the hobbies that I have. Here's where I live. Here's where I grew up. This is what my family is composed of. I got kids. This is their names. This is what my kids are like. We have that conversation with everybody brand new. So now we know each other. And then we go through within that context. Now we know each other. Now we start talking about the company's values and why it matters. And so we do this first kind of right away thing that sets the tone, I think, really well about there's an expectation, not only for them, but that they can feel rest assured. There's an expectation for everybody else about how they should expect to be treated by those people. So you can come in, and we've seen a few times people kind of come in with their baggage from their past jobs, and their back is so up. And then over time, you see them turn into just a different person, just a more lovely person, because they relax more, they help more, they trust more. It's amazing. So, but you got to get them there. So that's one thing we do to get them there. We do tons and tons of little events and things like that. Annually, we put out our where we're headed document. It's a one pager that says where the company's going that year and recaps a couple of the highlights from the prior year, along with a restatement of the mission, vision, and values. Usually they're the same, but the odd time they get a bit of an update. But sometimes it's just the same thing, but it gets posted and it stays up the whole year, and it goes on the lunch table and it goes on the wall and all these things, especially when it's being re-rolled out and then managers are sitting with their teams and going over all that and getting any questions. So there's kind of a formal process for communicating that stuff. But also, like, in our company, people feel like I'm very accessible. So everybody just walks up to me. Like, the person who's our maintenance person at our company will come sit in my office and chat with me about whatever's going right or wrong, whatever it is, like his ideas, his frustrations, whatever it is. But he just comes in my office. He doesn't say, "Hey, do you have time? Is it okay if I do that? Hey, can I make some time with you?" Mm-mm. He walks in, he makes some sort of joke at my expense. He sits down, we have a laugh, and we chat about our families and about the business. And that's just true for anybody who wants to do that, and they do. So, that happens over time, but there's the things that you sprinkle in, like the events and the appreciation days and all that. There's the orientation, there's the formal communication about the direction and the values and all that stuff. But then also there's just, you're going to get back what you give. So it's a mirror. Like, your people are a mirror of what you're doing. So if you think your people are cold and have a wall up with you, then you probably don't know, but you have that with them too. They're going to follow your lead on that. And what they think is permissible is going to be based on your precedent.
That's a beautiful example because yes, like they're going to reflect on what's going on inside you, and this is the irony. We can all look at our own lives, and if I look at my life, and everyone listening looks at their life, and they go to times when they've been cold and they've been closed off to someone, you'll notice that your values are unfulfilled. Why would you open up to someone where values are either unfulfilled or potentially at risk, right? They're at risk there. But when people support your values, understand what they are, and help you fulfill them, you open up immediately. And you'll see that those are the people you open up to the most. So yeah, if you have a culture where you're getting a cold shoulder all the time, like there's a reason why. There's genuinely a reason why.
Yeah, so I think when people say these kind of like tidbits of like these catchy lines, like when you're conversing with somebody, you should show interest in what they're interested in. I think these are shortcuts, but what you're talking about is like, why does it work that way? What's the foundation of that effect that people are describing? So like, yeah, it is good to know that you ought to show somebody interested what they're talking about, but you should understand why it is that you're supposed to be showing that interest. It's not just because like this is a checkbox for you, but it's because when you get to know that person and you feel a certain way about them, now you can see them in a positive light, and then they feel that. So that's really what you're after. So I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many ways, like even during this conversation, I think like, I'm describing some things I'm doing well, but I'm also thinking about, well, what do I need a little refresher on for myself? So that's the point though. That's the exercise for all of us, right?
No, I love that. Yes, there's going to be constantly things that we can improve as well. Because I think about that too. And it's like all the things you talk about. It's like, I have my own little saying, like, do better, but not in like a bad way. Like you suck, Carly, like do better. Like there's so much more to learn. And like you have this now, but you could do better. And when I think about doing better, it's an exciting thing. It's an inspiring thing. It's a challenge and it's hard. And sometimes I don't know how I'll get there, but it's something that like gets to show you your own human potential. And ironically, when you get someone to open up, it's like you're not just accessing the person and them working there, you're accessing that at like the greatest level of human potential that they can have. And humans have far greater potential than we ever give them credit for. Even with AI coming out, people are so worried. And I say it, like AI is as good as the individual who's programming it, which is still human. Everything is going to originate with the human, and AI gets better, not because AI is good. AI is amazing, but the humans who are doing what they're doing behind it is making it amazing. So it's like, if you can keep tapping into your own human potential, if you can tap into the potential of the individuals around you, you get to experience that, like not just within your company, but also within yourself, because you feel good about that. I was talking to another business owner, and they're in the film industry. Very interesting like dynamic. We did a podcast on, his company back in the day, but it was an interesting dynamic because they were all about seeing potential. So normally you don't get to just walk into the film industry and do what you want to do, but there you did. And if they saw potential in you, you still had to work for it. You had to work your way up, but they gave you opportunities. And present day, like a lot of the individuals who are some of the top producers and like directors and some sound people in the world
Yeah.
actually attribute to getting the chance at this company because someone saw potential in them.
Yeah.
So ironically, he was having a joke and he's like, the Fast and the Furious, they're doing like these things for 27 million. And he goes, it's not even good at ours. And we got it for 20K. And I was like, I love you so much. But he saw the potential. And when they were on set, the guy has all these crazy ideas. And finally he would agree and be like, do it. You have one shot. Basically, you have one shot. And he did it. And so it's amazing.
Yeah, I think like that's a really good example for me of like just because somebody works in your company, like don't get that twisted with like you own this person, right?
Yeah.
They're a person who maybe they land on, maybe for them your company is the shore, maybe. But we've got a whole section of people, really innovative people, especially young people, that when they arrive, sometimes we know we're a stepping stone for that person. That's not a reason not to hire them. That's a reason to really get what we can out of them and give them the support because we know they're going to jump to the next great thing. Now, firstly, why not just help them get there? That's great. We're here to support and be happy for each other, genuinely. But also, you never know where they're going to end up. We've had people kind of go on to other things, and all of a sudden, there's a big company that wants to do business with us because this person has such great experience with us before. So that's not the main reason you would do it, but it can be a nice byproduct. But
Yeah.
we do really recognize that, if the question is, hey, this person said they're only going to work here for a year or two because they have this education or they have this passion, and it looks like it's starting to turn out for them, they might leave. What should we do? Let's congratulate them. Let's see what we can do in the meantime. Like
Mm.
what are the great ideas you think we could be doing better so that before you leave, we can kind of capture that, like what can we do to make this really fun? And then you go on and do what you need to do. And that's fine. Um, so there's not this ownership thing that you have to have about people and you will still retain enough people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Okay. So we could probably go on forever. Like I said, when two philosophers get together and start talking about things that they love, human behavior and business combined, we could probably just sit here and talk for hours. So I would love for you to share with everyone just whatever you can think of, like a really inspiring takeaway for business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, just to help them in their own businesses get to the next step. Something inspiring from you.
I think that recognize each individual person as being something that you're dependent on.
Mhm.
So when you're working with a number of people, you have your role, and so do they, and those roles are equal in their importance in a lot of cases. And so your role is to just unlock those people, give them the autonomy, and let them take some risks, and let them have a good life. One of the things that drives me, why would I even care to be in a leadership role? It's not just for my ego. Uh, a big part of what I want is my experiment or challenge to myself is, can I make a place where the society inside the walls is actually better than the society outside the walls? And so I think challenge yourself to think about what kind of impact you're trying to make on these people that's better than if you weren't there, and then give people the ability to contribute to that.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And yeah, leadership as a service, which I think is
Yeah,
probably
for sure.
one of the most inspiring things you can do, and it's going to be far more fulfilling than puffing up your ego, that's for sure. Yeah, thank you so much. Share with listeners as well where they can find you, find out more information, connect with you.
Yeah, they can go to angelodamicocanada.com if they want to see some other things I've done in the past or that I'll be doing in the future. And then also Angelo D'Amico Canada on Instagram as well. Something in its infancy, but we'll see what happens with it in the near future.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes as well, just in case you couldn't write it down. And thank you again so much for coming today. This was a very inspiring and fun conversation.
Good to speak to you, Carly. Talk to you soon.